In a city where silence could cost you everything, one woman's whispered kindness would shatter the walls around Korea's most untouchable man. This is the story of Naomi Asante, a chef from Accra who crossed an ocean chasing dreams, never knowing that a single moment of compassion would rewrite 3 lives forever. What you're about to hear isn't just a love story. It's a story about being seen when the world refuses to look, about finding family in the most unexpected places, and about a little boy whose silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Welcome to Afro-Korean Vibes, where East meets West and love knows no borders. Hit that subscribe button and join our family as we explore stories of passion, danger, and destiny. Today's story will take you on a journey you won't forget. Seoul had a way of making you feel both infinite and insignificant at the same time. Naomi Asante learned this truth night after night at Cloud Peak Fusion, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, perched 47 floors above the glittering chaos below. She worked in the shadows. Her hands moved with precision, slicing, seasoning, plating dishes that would be photographed and praised. But she remained invisible. Just another face the wealthy didn't bother to remember. For an African woman in Seoul, standing out was easy. Belonging? That was the impossible dream. But Naomi wasn't here for acceptance. She was here to prove something. To her family back in Accra who called her foolish. To the visa officers who questioned her intentions. And most of all, to herself. She had come too far to be invisible anymore. And then, on an ordinary Thursday evening, everything changed. The restaurant fell into a hush. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Even the clinking of silverware seemed to quiet, as if the room itself was holding its breath. He had arrived. Kang Mi-ho. Even those who didn't know his name knew his presence. Billionaire tech CEO. Founder of Quantum Bridge Technologies. A man who had turned algorithms into empires and silence into power. His tailored suit cost more than most people's monthly salary. His reputation was carved from steel and ambition. And when he entered a room, the world rearranged itself around him. But it wasn't Kang Mi-ho who captured Naomi's attention that night. It was the small hand wrapped tightly in his. Ji-ho was 8 years old. And he was mute. Born with a rare condition that stole his voice before he ever had the chance to use it. Naomi watched as the hostess smiled at his father while pretending the boy didn't exist. Watched as the waiter spoke only to Kang Mi-ho, never once glancing down at the small, quiet child. She knew that feeling. That suffocating invisibility. Years ago, back in Accra, Naomi had a younger brother named Kojo. He was born with a cleft palate, and the neighborhood children were merciless. They mocked the way he spoke, the way his words came out twisted and strange. Naomi had learned then what cruelty looked like when it wore the mask of ignorance. And now, watching this boy, this lonely, silent boy drowning in a sea of people who refused to see him, something inside her broke. She made a choice. Naomi approached their table with water and menus. Her heart was pounding. This wasn't her job, she was kitchen staff, not a server. But when she reached their table, she didn't hand the menus to the father. She knelt down, eye level with the boy. And then, slowly, deliberately, she raised her hands. Her fingers formed shapes Ji-ho thought no one in this entire country would ever make for him. Korean Sign Language. Hello. My name is Naomi. What's yours? The boy froze. His eyes went wide not with fear, but with shock. With desperate, aching hope. For a moment, he didn't move. As if afraid that if he blinked, this moment would disappear like every other dream. Then, trembling, his small hands lifted. Pause 2 seconds. My name is Ji-ho. Across the table, Kang Mi-ho had gone completely still. He had expected another performance. Another night of staff who smiled at him while looking through his son. But this woman, this foreign chef he'd never seen before, had just spoken his son's language. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Ji-ho was smiling. Not the polite, learned smile he used to avoid questions, but a real smile. The kind that comes from being truly, finally seen. Naomi should have walked away, returned to her station, remembered her place. But Ji-ho's small hand reached out and gently tugged her sleeve. His fingers moved quickly, desperately. Please don't go. Please talk to me more. And how could she refuse? The dinner became something no one expected. Naomi sat with them, awkward at first, aware of the whispers from other staff, the confused glances from wealthy patrons. But Jiho was radiant. He signed story after story. About his school where no one understood him. About his pet turtle named Helix who had opinions about lettuce. About the books he read alone in his enormous room. Naomi listened. Truly listened. And responded with patience and warmth that made the boy's isolated world finally feel less empty. And all the while, Kang Mi-ho watched. Silent. Intense. Studying this woman who had done what armies of therapists and specialists could not. She had reached his son. At one point, Jiho signed something that made Naomi's cheeks warm. Do you like my papa? Naomi hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly. Before she could respond, Kang Mi-ho's deep voice cut through the moment. What did he ask? Naomi swallowed. He asked if I like you, sir. A long silence stretched between them. The air grew heavy. Then Mi-ho's lips curved, not quite a smile, but something dangerously close. And do you? His question was quiet, but it landed like thunder. Naomi lowered her gaze, choosing her words carefully. I respect you, sir. It was the safest answer she could give, though it barely scratched the surface of the storm brewing inside her chest. As the evening ended, Kang Mi-ho stood, buttoning his coat with mechanical precision. But before he left, he did something unexpected. He placed a business card on the table in front of Naomi. My son needs consistency, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Someone who can help him navigate a world that refuses to speak his language. Naomi stared at the card, her heart racing. I want to hire you. To tutor Jiho. To spend time with him. To give him what others refuse. Sir, I'm just a chef, I'm not. You're someone who sees him. His gaze locked onto hers, dark and unyielding. That's rarer than any credential. Jiho grabbed her hand, his small fingers squeezing tight. His eyes pleaded in the language that needed no words. Think about it, Mi-ho added. But know this, when I make an offer, it is not casual. And then they were gone. Leaving Naomi standing in the middle of the restaurant, holding a business card that felt like a hand grenade disguised as opportunity. For 3 days, Naomi stared at that card. She would pick it up, put it down, hold it to the light as if the answer might reveal itself in the embossed lettering. Part of her wanted to say yes, not for his wealth or status, but for Jiho. For that little boy whose laughter had become tattooed on her heart in a single evening. But another part of her was terrified. Men like Kang Mi-ho didn't exist in her world. His universe was built on power, on boardrooms, and billion-dollar decisions. One misstep, and she could lose everything, her job, her visa, her carefully constructed life in Seoul. And beneath all that logic was a truth she didn't dare admit. The way his eyes had lingered on her. The electricity that crackled when he stood too close. That terrified her most of all. On the 4th day, she made the call. The car that picked her up wasn't just expensive. It was a statement. Black. Sleek. Soundless. As it glided through Seoul's streets, leaving the chaos of Gangnam behind, the city transformed. Buildings became estates. Noise became silence. Crowds became curated distance. They entered Songbukdong, where Korea's old money and new power lived side by side. And then, the gates. Massive. Black iron. Opening soundlessly to reveal a driveway lined with cherry blossom trees, their pink petals trembling in the afternoon breeze. Naomi's breath caught. This wasn't a house. This was a kingdom. The mansion rose before her like something from a different century. Traditional Korean architecture married to modern glass and steel. Stone walls that had witnessed generations. Gardens so perfect they looked painted. Naomi stepped out of the car, suddenly hyper-aware of her simple dress, her modest shoes, the gap between her world and this one. And then she heard it. Footsteps. Small, running. Jiho burst through the front entrance, his face transformed with pure joy. He ran straight to her, throwing his small arms around her waist. You came, his hands signed frantically when he finally pulled back. Papa said you might not come. Naomi knelt, her throat tight with emotion. "I promised, didn't I?" At the top of the stairs, Kang Mi-ho stood watching. Even in casual clothes, dark slacks, and a charcoal sweater, he commanded attention. "Welcome," he said simply. But his eyes said far more than that single word. The weeks that followed transformed all three of their lives. Naomi came every day. At first, she told herself it was just a job, just helping a child who needed her. But it became so much more. She taught Jiho sign language, yes, but she also taught him confidence. How to hold his head high when people stared. How to laugh without shame. How to exist fully in a body the world tried to diminish. They cooked together, her Ghanaian recipes meeting his grandmother's Korean dishes. They explored Seoul's quieter corners. Museums. Bookshops. Parks where Jiho could run and play without the weight of his father's name crushing him. And slowly, impossibly, Kang Mi-ho began to change too. Mi-ho started joining them for dinner. Not as the distant CEO who supervised from afar, but as a father learning to be present. He asked questions about Naomi's life. About her childhood in Accra. About the dreams that carried her across an ocean. And she learned about him too. About the father who died disgraced, his company destroyed by partners he trusted. About young Mi-ho rebuilding the family name from ashes, working 100-hour weeks, sacrificing everything. About the wife who looked at their mute son and called him defective. Who left 3 years ago, taking nothing but her freedom and leaving behind a boy she refused to love. "I failed him," Mi-ho confessed one night. They were alone in his study, a sanctuary of dark wood and unread books. Jiho had fallen asleep after a long day of exploration. "You didn't fail him," Naomi said gently. "You're here now. That's what matters." Mi-ho's hands clenched into fists. His jaw worked as he fought for control. "I gave him everything except what he needed. I was so busy protecting him from the world that I forgot to just be with him." "Then start now," Naomi said softly. Mi-ho looked up at her. Really looked, not with the analytical gaze of a CEO dissecting a problem, but with raw vulnerability. "You make it seem simple." "It's not simple," she admitted. "But it's possible." He stood abruptly, crossing to the floor-to-ceiling window. Seoul glittered below his empire, his kingdom. But in that moment, it all felt hollow. "You don't belong in this world, Naomi," he said, his back still to her. "You're too kind for it. Too real. Maybe your world needs more reality." He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Longing. Fear. Something unspoken and undeniable. Or maybe you'll be devoured by it. Pause 3 seconds. It was a warning. But it was also a confession. The space between them crackled with electricity. Dangerous. Inevitable. Naomi stood slowly. She should leave. Walk away before crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But she didn't move. Neither did he. And in that charged silence, something shifted irreversibly. But the world outside those walls was watching. And it was not kind. The first crack appeared as a camera flash. Quick. Distant. Easy to dismiss. Naomi was leaving the estate late one evening when she noticed it. Just a flicker in the darkness beyond the gates. She thought nothing of it. Until the next morning. Her phone exploded with notifications. Messages. Calls. Alerts. And then she saw the headline. Mystery woman in Kang Mi-ho's life. Who is the African chef stealing the tech giant's heart? Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Photos of her entering the estate. Photos of her with Jiho at a park. Photos that painted a narrative she hadn't written. The comments section was a war zone. Gold digger. Opportunist. What does she want from him? How did someone like her get access to someone like him? Within hours, the story had metastasized. News sites. Social media. Speculation and hatred spreading like wildfire. And then her phone rang. It was the head chef from Cloud Peak Fusion. "Don't come in today," he said, his voice tight and uncomfortable. "The owners, they think it's best if you take some time off." Indefinitely. The line went dead. She had just been fired. Naomi sat in her tiny apartment, the phone still pressed to her ear even though the call had ended. Everything she'd worked for. Everything she'd sacrificed. Gone. Because she dared to be kind to a lonely child. Because she dared to exist in a world that didn't want her there. While Naomi's world was crumbling, Kang Mi-ho was fighting a different war. The boardroom of Quantum Bridge Technologies was designed to intimidate. Massive. Cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seoul skyline like a throne room overlooking a kingdom. 12 men and 2 women sat around the polished table. Board members. Investors. People who measured success in profit margins and stock prices. And they had concerns. "This is unacceptable," said Park Jae-sung, the company's CFO and one of the original investors. "Your personal life is becoming a liability, Mi-ho." "My personal life," Mi-ho replied, his voice dangerously calm, "is none of your concern. It is when it affects the company's image," another board member snapped. "Investors are nervous. Shareholders are asking questions. And this woman. Careful." The single word from Mi-ho's lips cut like a blade. But they didn't stop. "She's a distraction at best," Park continued. "At worst, she's calculating. Using your son to get to you. Either way, she needs to go." The words hung in the air like poison. Mi-ho's hands, resting on the table, slowly clenched into fists. His knuckles went white. "My son," he said, each word deliberate and deadly, "is not a business concern. His happiness is not negotiable. Mi-ho, be reasonable. Your son has the best specialists money can buy. He doesn't need some chef playing savior." Something in Mi-ho snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. He straightened, his 6-foot frame suddenly seeming even taller. His eyes, behind those silver-rimmed glasses, went cold as winter. "Gentlemen. Ladies. Let me be abundantly clear." His voice was soft. Lethal. "My son's happiness is not up for discussion. If you cannot respect that, there's the door." He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "And if you think I built this company to let a room full of cowards tell me how to live my life, you've forgotten who holds the real power here." The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. "This meeting," Mi-ho said quietly, "is over." He walked out, leaving the board in stunned silence. But Mi-ho knew the truth. This wasn't over. The pressure would only increase. In his world, love was a weakness. And weaknesses were exploited. But as he drove through Seoul's streets that evening, heading toward Naomi's modest apartment building, none of that mattered. Because somewhere in the past few weeks, she had stopped being just his son's tutor. She had become something he couldn't afford to lose. Meanwhile, Naomi had tried to disappear. She stopped answering Jiho's messages. Stopped going to the estate. She told herself it was for the best. That she had disrupted their lives enough. That she didn't belong in a world of scandal and scrutiny. But Jiho didn't understand. The video messages broke her heart. Small hands signing frantically. "Why won't you come back? Did I do something wrong? Please, Miss Naomi. I miss you. I need you." Each message shattered her a little more. On the 7th day of her self-imposed exile, there was a knock at her apartment door. She opened it and found Kang Mi-ho standing in her narrow hallway, looking distinctly out of place in his designer suit amid the peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights. "You stopped coming," he said. No greeting. No preamble. Naomi pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. "I thought it was best." "For who?" His voice was sharp. "For my son, who cries himself to sleep asking what he did to drive you away?" Her chest tightened. "I lost my job. My name is being dragged through the mud. I don't belong in your world, Mr. Kong. I never did." "My world is broken," he said fiercely, stepping closer. "It's cold and cruel and it destroys everything soft. But you." His hand reached out, hovering just inches from her face, trembling slightly. "You made my son laugh. You reminded me what it feels like to be human. And if you think I'm going to let you walk away because of a few cowards hiding behind cameras, you don't know me at all." Tears burned in Naomi's eyes. "This will only get worse. For you. For your company. For Jiho. Then let it." The rawness in his voice broke something inside her. "I'm not afraid of storms, Naomi," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've weathered worse. But losing you." He paused, and she saw it, the fear beneath the armor. That's the only thing that terrifies me. The confession hung between them, trembling with everything they'd been too afraid to name. I can't promise you safety, Miho said. I can't promise you easy. But I can promise you this. He took her hand. His touch was gentle despite the strength in it. Pause 2 seconds. You will never face this alone. Not while I'm breathing. Naomi's walls crumbled. Her carefully constructed defenses dissolved. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. And in that moment, in the fluorescent-lit hallway of her shabby apartment, the choice was made. They would fight. Together. The press conference was Miho's idea. Not a defensive, corporate-approved statement carefully crafted by PR teams. But raw, unfiltered truth. The lobby of Quantum Bridge Technologies was packed. Cameras. Reporters. Journalists from every major outlet. And at the podium, instead of standing alone as he always had, King Miho stood with Naomi's hand clasped firmly in his. The shock was immediate. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions in a cacophony of Korean and English. But Miho raised his hand, and somehow, the room fell silent. I called this conference, Miho began, his voice steady and clear, to address the speculation surrounding my personal life. The room erupted again. He waited. Naomi Asante is not a scandal. She is not a distraction. She is not what your headlines claim. He turned slightly, looking at Naomi with an expression that needed no translation. She is the woman who saw my son, truly saw him, when the rest of the world looked away. She is the reason my son smiles. The reason he laughs. The reason he believes he matters. His grip on her hand tightened. And yes, she is the woman I love. The silence that followed was absolute. Cameras flashed in a blinding storm, but Miho never looked away from the podium. I don't expect everyone to understand. Nor do I require your approval. But I will not stand by while she is vilified for the crime of being kind. His voice dropped, but lost none of its power. If loving her makes me unfit to lead this company, then so be it. My son and this woman matter more than any boardroom. More than any profit margin. More than anything this company has ever built. The questions came fast and furious after that. Mr. Kong, what about the board? What will this mean for Quantum Bridge stock? Ms. Asante, how do you respond to accusations of? Miho's voice cut through like steel. Ms. Asante is not on trial here. Neither am I. This press conference is over. But before they left, he turned back to the microphones one final time. To anyone who has ever felt invisible. To anyone told they don't belong. To anyone who has loved across boundaries that others claim should exist. He looked directly into the cameras. You are not alone. And you are not wrong. Then he led Naomi through the sea of cameras, his hand never leaving hers. The backlash was immediate. Some investors pulled out. The company's stock dipped. Conservative media outlets called him reckless, irresponsible, accused him of prioritizing personal desires over professional duty. But something unexpected happened too. Support. Messages poured in from parents of special needs children, thanking him for seeing what they saw in their own kids. From interracial couples who had faced similar scrutiny. From people who had felt invisible their whole lives, who saw themselves in Naomi and found hope. Within 2 weeks, Quantum Bridge stock had not only recovered, it had soared. New investors approached, drawn not in spite of Miho's honesty, but because of it. Turns out, in a world of corporate masks and calculated PR, raw humanity was revolutionary. And at home, everything changed. Naomi didn't just visit anymore. She moved into the Kong estate. Not as staff. Not as a tutor. As family. The transformation was subtle at first. Then undeniable. Laughter-filled halls that had known only silence. The kitchen, once cold and pristine, became warm with the scent of spices, Ghanaian kontomire meeting Korean doenjang in ways that shouldn't work but somehow did. Naomi taught both father and son to cook together. To play. To exist beyond the weight of expectation. She convinced Miho to take weekends off, a concept that had been foreign to him for decades. And slowly, the man who had built empires from algorithms learned something more valuable. He learned to live. Late at night, when Jiho was asleep, Miho would find Naomi on the terrace. She'd be standing at the railing, looking out at the city that had once felt so hostile. He would wrap his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Thank you," he would whisper. "For what?" "For being brave enough to stay." And Naomi would lean back into his warmth, marveling at how far they'd come. From a chance encounter in a crowded restaurant to this, a love that had survived scrutiny, scandal, and a world determined to tear them apart. But they had learned something important. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choice. The choice to see each other, to fight for each other, to believe that some things were worth the battle. 2 years later, the gardens of the Kong estate had transformed into something magical. Cherry blossoms, yes, those traditional Korean beauties that Miho's grandmother had planted decades ago. But now they shared space with roses, jasmine, and vibrant Ghanaian hibiscus that Naomi had planted with her own hands. The garden had become a living metaphor, two cultures, two worlds, growing together in beautiful harmony. And running through those blossoms, his laughter ringing like music, was Jiho. But he wasn't alone anymore. He ran with friends from his new school, an inclusive academy that Miho had helped fund. Hearing children and deaf children, Korean kids and international students. All of them laughing. All of them signing. All of them belonging. Naomi stood at the edge of the garden, watching them play. A smile played on her lips, the kind that comes from deep, settled joy. She wore a simple sundress, her natural hair free and full. No more hiding. No more shrinking. She had found her place. Miho appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers. He'd changed too. The hard edges had softened. The cold distance had warmed. He still ran Quantum Bridge, more successfully than ever actually. But now he left the office at 6. Attended school plays. Taught his son to ride a bike. He had learned to balance Continue Deck 29 Empire, building with living. "I never imagined this," Naomi said softly, watching Jiho sign animatedly to his friends. That a single moment of kindness could lead to all of this. Miho turned to look at her, his eyes soft behind those silver-rimmed glasses. "You didn't just change my son's life, Naomi. You changed mine." Suddenly, Jiho came running over, slightly out of breath. His signing had become confident, fluid, no longer the hesitant gestures of a boy who thought no one cared to listen. "Family photo," he signed excitedly. "We need a family photo. Everyone's asking to see pictures." Naomi laughed, signing back, "Everyone? Who's everyone?" "My friends. My teachers. The whole school knows I have the best family." Miho's eyes glistened. Just a little. But Naomi noticed. "Come on, Papa." Jiho grabbed both their hands, tugging them toward a spot under the cherry blossom trees where his friends had set up a tablet on a makeshift stand. The children had planned this. A gift to the family that had shown them all what inclusion really meant. They gathered together under the blossoms, Miho, Naomi, and Jiho in the center, with Jiho's friends forming a circle around them. The tablet's camera timer counted down. But instead of posing stiffly, something spontaneous happened. Jiho said something funny in sign language, something about his father being terrible at cooking even after 2 years of lessons. Miho protested with mock offense. Naomi doubled over laughing. And that's when the camera captured it. Not a posed, perfect family portrait, but a real moment. Genuine. Messy. Beautiful. 3 people who had found each other against impossible odds. A tech mogul who learned that vulnerability was strength. A chef from Accra who proved that kindness could move mountains. And a little boy whose silence had spoken louder than any words and brought them all together. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and friends headed home, the 3 of them walked through the garden together. Jiho in the middle, holding both their hands. They walked slowly, in no particular hurry, as cherry blossoms continued their gentle fall. "Papa," Jiho signed when they reached the far edge of the garden. "Are we always going to be together?" Miho knelt down, bringing himself to his son's eye level, something he'd learned from Naomi that first night. "Always," he signed back. "No matter what." "Promise?" Jiho's eyes were serious now, carrying echoes of a boy who had once been abandoned. Naomi knelt beside Miho, forming the sign with him. "Promise." They both signed together. Jiho threw his arms around both of them, and they held him there in the fading light, surrounded by flowers that proved two worlds could grow together. Not a traditional family. Not a perfect family. But a real one. Built on silence that learned to speak. On storms that taught them to dance. On love that chose to stay. And in that garden, beneath blossoms that knew no borders, they had found something rarer than wealth or power or prestige. They had found home. Not a place, but a feeling. The feeling of being seen. Of being chosen. Of being loved, not in spite of differences, but because those differences made them whole. Seoul glittered in the distance, the city that had once seemed so hostile now bearing witness to a love story it never saw coming. The story of Naomi Asante, who crossed an ocean chasing dreams and found a family. The story of Kang Miho, who built empires but nearly lost his soul, until a kind stranger reminded him what truly mattered, and the story of Jiho, a boy whose silence spoke the loudest truth of all. That love doesn't need words. It just needs to be real. This story began with a simple act. A woman kneeling down to meet a child's eyes. Hands forming shapes that said, "I see you. You matter." In a world that moves too fast, that judges too quickly, that builds walls between people who are more alike than different. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is kindness. Naomi Asante didn't set out to change anyone's life. She just refused to look away when a child needed to be seen. But that single choice created ripples that became waves. It saved a little boy who thought he was invisible. It awakened a man who had forgotten how to feel. And it proved something important. That families aren't just born. They're chosen. They're built. They're fought for. That love doesn't have borders. It doesn't see race or status or language barriers. It only sees souls. And when two souls recognize each other, really, truly see each other, nothing in this world can keep them apart. Today, the Kang family lives in their garden paradise in Songbuk-dong. Jiho attends an inclusive academy where he excels not just in academics, but in helping other children feel seen. Naomi runs a successful fusion restaurant. Cloud Peak Fusion hired her back at double the salary, and when she declined, she opened her own place. It's become Seoul's most sought-after reservation. And Kang Miho? He still runs Quantum Bridge Technologies. But he's also become an advocate for inclusive education, disability rights, and interracial families. Because he learned that the most valuable algorithm isn't one you can code. It's love. Messy. Complicated. Requiring constant debugging and updates. But when it works, it changes everything. This was the story of when a Ghanaian chef signed to a mute Korean boy and accidentally rewrote 3 destinies. A story about silence that learned to speak. About walls that came down. And about a love powerful enough to make even the untouchable man kneel. Thank you for listening. Until next time, and remember, you never know when a simple act of kindness might change someone's entire world. This is Afro-Korean Vibes. And I'll see you in the next story.